Hi, I'm Matthew Kelly, and welcome to Profoundly Human. My guest today is Lisa Brenninkmeyer, author of Walking with Purpose. Lisa, great to be with you. How are you?
Doing very well. Great to be with you as well. I've looked forward to this.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. So you published a book a while ago now, and it's been phenomenally successful. When you go back to before you wrote the book, what was it that led you or inspired you or called you to write Walking with Purpose?
Oh, I love that story because I was pregnant with our seventh at the time. And I was at that point writing a Bible study a year. Walking with Purpose had just begun, and we published Catholic Women's Bible Studies and help women come into community and study together. And that was absolutely taking any spare time I had that wasn't being absorbed by my family. And out of the blue, I got a phone call from you. And I was in the middle, actually, I was about 3 weeks away from giving birth to our seventh, and we were moving house because that is a great time to decide to move. And so literally we were bringing boxes in. You called, they picked up the phone, stopped everything and sat down, and we visited about various things. And you asked me the question, would you ever write a book? Have you ever thought about it? And I just said, oh, I don't have time to write a book. And but what I have out there are Bible studies, and I started to tell you what it is. And goes, yeah, okay, fine. But what about for the woman who, doesn't have something like that in her area? She doesn't have Walking with Purpose. You can't direct her to go join a group. And I said, well, then I would talk to her about starting a group. And you're like, yeah, she doesn't want to do that. So you're talking to someone, she doesn't have a group in the area. She doesn't want to start it. And you led me through all these questions that led me to finally have to say, oh, well, then I don't have anything for her. And you're like, well, maybe you would consider sitting down and writing something for that woman who is feeling isolated, can't plug into something that's already speaking to her heart within her parish or within her community, right to her. And so I kept thinking about it. I had a baby, and was busier than anything because, of course, seventh child and all those things. And so I hadn't written anything. When one weekend I got snowed in alone in my house. So I was supposed to be joining my family on a weekend skiing, and I'd come in from out of town from a different meeting, and weather was bad. So I ended up having to stop halfway there, which was my home, and saying to my family, you all ski. Baby Charlotte and I are just going to sit for the weekend. And I realized there is absolutely nothing being demanded of me right now. What if I sat on my couch and just saw what I could bang out? And true confessions, I had a tub of frosting and a box of graham crackers. And that is what I ate all weekend. And I sat in my pajamas and wrote and nursed. And that's what I did all weekend long. And at the end of it, I had a rough draft, and I reached out to you, and I'm like, I don't even know if this is any good. I don't even know if you would like it. And correct me if I'm wrong in the way that I remember it, but I sent it to you. It sat on your desk, and my understanding is that Maggie took it and read it, and she said, this is good. And so I then said to you, oh, good. Okay, well, then give it back to me because I'll fix it. And you said to me, a book is never finished, it's abandoned. And if you take it back, you will anesthetize it. I'm like, no. I'm just going to fix it so that if my mom reads it, or if my friend from high school reads it, or this, you're like, don't touch it. So I just gave it to you, and I said, okay, edit it. And I didn't think a lot more of it because the process was honestly so easy with you that until right before it was launching, that was when I had a total panic, because I'm like, what have I said? I never checked it. I never, made sure every story, I don't know, put me in a good light or put others in a good light. But it seemed to have hit a mark of just realness, I think, among
Yes, 100%, which is massively missing. When you've done this work with women for so long and impacted so many, when did you first feel called or decide to do this work with and for women?
I would say there were two moments of calling, and one was just into women's ministry, and one on a kind of local level, and the other was with a little wider lens within the Catholic Church. So the first was in my early 20s. I had been a part of a small group Bible study when I was living in Germany, and there were about 7 of us being led by an older woman, and she just led us for 6 weeks. And these women were so hungry. And after the 6 weeks, she said, I just don't think I'm called to do this anymore. And that frustrated me so much because I thought, they're hungry, you're capable, you should be mentoring us. We need spiritual mothering. And why would you say no? And she just kept saying, I just don't think it's meant to be me. And then I had a very strange experience of having been to a prayer meeting where a woman met me there. I didn't talk to her much, but she called me out of the blue and said, I feel like I have a word from the Lord for you. To which I immediately thought, you're weird. Like, who does that? And I'm like, do you then? Well, by all means, tell me what God told you about me. And she said, I don't know what this means, but the message I'm supposed to give you is that the person who's supposed to lead it is you.
Mm.
And I was like, that is actually kind of weird. So I hung up the phone with her and I said to the Lord, I need a little more confirmation than that. And so I did what I don't recommend. I really don't recommend this, but I opened the Bible and like, then you speak to me, and opened it, put my finger on a verse from 2 Timothy, which said, do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in terms of your life, your love, your faith, and your purity. And my big hangup was my age. I was too young to do this with women who are older than me and ahead of the game. And so I did end up stepping out. And that was my first experience leading a small group. And I'm doing a little bit of Bible teaching as well, a little bit of that format. And then I did some small group stuff, but mainly I was raising my kids, having, 2 kids in Germany, then 2 kids in Mexico, moved back to the States. And at that point was really discontent in my placement within the Catholic Church. That's the way I'll put it. So I'm a convert and I grew up in an evangelical church that was very warm. And I was really ready to move back to a church. And this is how I would describe it, where people were nice to you. I mean, that's honestly, that was like the low level I want. I'm like, if people could just smile and welcome me, that would be such a win. And I was going to a non-denominational Bible study at the time, praying every night that we would switch churches. My dad was a pastor at a mega church in DC, about 40 minutes from us. I'm like, I will make the drive. And I went to the leader of the Bible study and said to her, I just am having such trouble worshiping where I am. I have all these hangups, like this I don't like, and that I don't like, and I'm listing all the things that I don't like. And she looked at me and she said, this kind of sounds like a personal problem because you can worship God anywhere. And she said, if there's something you're discontent about, why don't you decide to be the change that you want to see?
Mm.
And I really wanted her to just feel sorry for me. And she didn't. She was like, get moving. And I'm like, well, I have a lot going on. I have a lot of kids and I don't have time. She's like, well, that's my advice to you. And it wasn't long after that a small group of young moms came to me and said, we hear you lead Bible study. We want to have a personal relationship with God and we don't know how. Will you help us? And that's when Walking with Purpose was born at that point. And that was a real yes to the Lord. The first one was a yes to the Lord. I'm not going to look at my limitations and have that be my excuse for not stepping out and serving. I'm going to let you work through my limitations and I'm going to let them be what keeps me humble, which the Lord has never failed to continue to allow me those beautiful opportunities that are humbling. But the second time was an opportunity to say yes to stop complaining about what I didn't like and to simply get in there and start doing the things that I wanted to see. So both of those were real shifts for me that led me into what I would say is my calling.
Wow. When you look around the world today and through your work, what are women thinking, feeling, experiencing?
I think that across the boards, I think women are anxious. Women feel, I would say women my age and up feel a lack of control over areas that they feel like are their responsibility. And by that, I mean the care of their children. I just think things that are going on in the world, the way in which it feels like things almost capture our kids before we could even get there and do anything about that. I think that causes a lot of anxiety for women. And I think women feel like I don't have the tools in the toolkit to know how to address this. This isn't stuff that I watched my mom navigating with me. And as I move towards younger women, I see the same anxiety, but I see the anxiety being less about, I'm responsible for this and I don't know how to do this well, and more about, I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm here. My sense is that I am in a world where there is no overarching meaning, and I'm being told, lucky you, you've got the freedom to define it all for yourself. But what I see in young girls is that simply causes anxiety and it causes depression because they can't come up with a meaning for the world, a meaning for their life, a definition of who they are that they're sure is right, and that isn't simply too effortful to even figure out. So that's how I would look at anxiety overall, but how it maybe is different with different age groups.
In the opening of Walking with Purpose, you talk about putting the basics in place.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
What I mean is that we're going to always have lives that are out of kilter. Like if you are waiting to bring, God into your life and prioritize, give him that place of priority where something in you senses he's supposed to be there. I think so often we want to wait till everything's in order and we're like, and then I'm going to nicely bring spirituality into my life. And the truth is that life is pretty much constantly throwing us things from the side where we're like, oh, I didn't see that. And we have to really decide what are the things that are going to be just the foundational principles or truths that I'm going to just keep coming back to, because as I'm thrown off, I can come back and look. And that was really at the heart of the 7 priorities that I lay out in the book. I don't lay them out saying these are the priorities in this order that I perfectly live. But what I will say is that when I start to feel something's off, if I look at those priorities, I can go, oh, well, because this priority I'm actually ignoring, or I've taken this lower priority and I've moved it up to first place. And so things aren't in balance and I'm feeling that in my life. So getting those basics in place of knowing what is the one thing that matters most. And if I do this well, it has been a good day, as opposed to looking at everything that's being asked of us all at once, holding it all as being equally important, and then just doing our best to run after it all, which really leads to just a sense of never doing anything well and everything being quite out of control.
What, in the midst of all of that, do you think makes women's spirituality unique?
Okay. Well, I love that question because I want to jump back to the other one that you asked about how women are at today. What do you see when you look at women today? I think another thing that is going on with women, this is just my gut. I can't give you a statistic about this, but this is what I'm seeing. I think women are afraid to feel. I think we're afraid of our emotions. I think we are afraid that if we start to really lean into what we feel about certain things, we might start to cry and we might not stop. And as a result, I think there's a tremendous amount of compartmentalizing that goes on with women. Like, this is this area of my life. I want to get a read on this, and then I want to set it over here so that I can move on. And we do this with our marriages. We do this with our kids. We do this with life's disappointments. We do this with relationships. We do with things at work. And what we want is to keep things tamped down enough that we don't become too much. We don't lose control. And what I think is needed in women's spirituality is a way of bringing faith and a relationship with God into our emotional lives that redeems it, that doesn't say tamp that down, but comes into that very heartache, makes sense of it, brings comfort in it, and helps us to be emotionally strong women. Because I think we can have some extremes where we're either over here tamping everything down and doing our best not to feel, and we can do that by numbing out, or we can just do that by developing a tough exterior where we're just like, I don't care about whatever. Or we can be over here where we feel everything to such a degree that we're kind of a heap on the floor, right? And neither one of those things are what God is calling us to do. The world needs strong women who know who they are, women who are in touch with their emotional lives, but have invited God into those places so that he can work there and redeem there. So what is a big distinctive of our Bible studies at Walking with Purpose is we pursue emotionally healthy spirituality. So we bring our heart into the equation here. And maybe maybe this is true of men too. Like Matthew, you can tell me, I can't believe this isn't true of men too, that your hearts don't need to be brought into it all. Men who tell me they don't, I'd like to go toe to toe with them on that, because I mean, we all have hearts, right? But I think especially for women, if that is missing, and if spirituality is looked at as almost, this is a list of do's and don'ts, these are the behaviors that are required of you, then really all we're talking about is behavior modification, and God's after our hearts, and he's after a personal relationship with our real selves, and to go into the depth there and come with his presence and actually transform us from within. And whether that's unique to women as a need, all I will say is that's what works with women. That's why women come back, because they're not coming to Walking with Purpose because this is a Bible study and I would like to learn how to read the Bible because I feel kind of insecure about it. Women come back because they're seen, they're known, their hearts are invited in, and then they're not just left there. It's like, and now how can we be stronger? Now, how can we pursue the kind of lives God is calling us to be? And that kind of heart transformation is, it's what women long for. And when you do that in the context of community with other women, and women know they're not alone, and they're loved in their mess, but then they're encouraged to be stronger and to be all that God is calling them to be, that's incredible to see. It's life-changing. It really is.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in the scriptures is after the presentation of Jesus in the temple, and Simeon prophesies about Jesus, his place in the world, his place in history. And Mary and Joseph leave, and there's just this one line on the end of the story, and it says, and Mary pondered all these things in her heart. It would seem to me that both as men and women, this is a quintessential life skill. It is something that we've lost. And then in listening to you in the last couple of answers, it makes me wonder, are we externalizing things that should be internalized and internalizing things that should be externalized? And why are we lacking this ability to ponder these things in our hearts?
I think we're afraid.
What are we afraid of?
Well, I think we're afraid of emotion. Like I'm afraid of what we'll discover when we get there. I think we are afraid of quiet. And I think we are afraid to hope.
I know hope is a big theme for you. What is it that makes us afraid to hope, and why is hope so important?
Well, just speaking personally, I personally struggle to hope at times because I'm afraid if I do, I've just opened my heart up wide to be disappointed. So then if it doesn't go the way that I hoped it would, and I'm talking about big areas of life, things that have to do with people, the people we love, then if I've opened myself up to hope, have I just actually opened myself up to the potential for even more pain? But if I don't hope, and if I have a negative expectation, then I'm not disappointed. I saw it coming. I prepped for it. I didn't lean in. And there's something in hoping where you're bearing your chest to the wind. You're like letting it all come, and you are showing up and being fully human with all that entails, with the good emotions that feel so great and the things that hurt, but you're saying, but I want to be fully alive. I want to show up here. And I think that's scary with hope. I think it's disappointment, I suppose, that is the biggest thing. And disappointment can then call into question the goodness of God, right? If God is all powerful, if God hears me, if God loves me, then what's up with all the ways in which he is not answering my prayers the way I've laid out, Yes. And so I think we get afraid that if we get quiet, maybe God won't talk back. If we get quiet, we'll start to question, and we don't know where to go with our questions because we know what we're supposed to believe, but maybe we don't have safe places to ask those questions, and we're afraid to hope, because what if the other shoe drops? But we need hope. We need hope because without it, we become defeatist. Without it, we become We become mechanical, we become dour, we become the kind of people that nobody wants to be with because it's all doom and gloom. It's the opposite of exemplifying the joy of the gospel. I mean, good news, forget it. I mean, that's not seen in us. And I think the key is with hope is that we define it, because I think so often we think, well, hope is, I know what I want to happen and maybe it will. That's hope. But what we're told in scripture, that hope is a person. We're actually told hope is Jesus. So that's different. So that's saying, okay, so I'm opening up in hope to the fact that Jesus is what makes the difference. And he steps into whatever situation I'm in, and he is going to make it better. He is. Like, I can count on that to be true. Is it going to be the way I want it to be better? Is it going to be on my timeline? Thus far, no, is what I would say to that. From my experience, not really. But he is there. And I think his answer to all of it is his presence. But if we're not quiet, if we're doing exactly what you're saying, that we're talking with other people about things that we need to talk to God about, right? And it's all external, then we don't encounter him in that same way.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, our suffering from the past has the ability to rob us of our hope for the future. And if that is true, what do women need to know about suffering?
Oh, it's such an unpopular thing to say, but it's that we need it. We actually need it. And I'm always comforted by the story of Saint Monica, and I'm just paraphrasing, but she was, of course, praying for the conversion of Saint Augustine with everything she had. And what ends up happening in her life is that she's praying that he will stay close. He will stay where it's safe. And don't we all pray that for our kids? And instead, he gets on a boat and he goes exactly to where she does not want him to go. But he talks about the fact God was answering the real prayer of your heart, my conversion, by saying no to what you wanted right here and right now. And I think what in that moment would have felt like, and here's another problem. He left, he went, God was at work in it, and it needed to happen. That problem, that suffering needed to be felt so that the redemption and the bigger answer to prayer would come. And in our own lives, I guess it really does boil down to, like what I just said about suffering, that actually only counts if what you want more than anything is to be like Jesus. Because if you're honest and you say, what do I want more than anything? I want to be comfortable. I want to be happy. Well, then everything I just said doesn't apply, because we need the suffering when we want to be like Jesus. But ultimately, at the end of our lives, that is what we're going to realize. That is what I was supposed to want. Yeah. And comfort wasn't a good enough goal. And short-term happiness wasn't a good enough goal. I was supposed to be here to know God better, to know him intimately, to be changed so that I would become more like him, so that I would love like him. And we learn to do that as we suffer. And sometimes our suffering isn't for us. It's for people who are watching us. And what they're learning is they realize, oh, wow, this still applies. The truths of our faith still apply, even when the unthinkable is happening. I remember a story of a woman who lost her husband and lost her children, and her life just looked like one big tragedy. And someone said to her, what are you going to do now? And do you know what she said? She smiled and she said, now I'm going to start proving the promises of God. Because before it was like, well, sure, that worked out for you because everything was working out for you. Now I'm going to prove his promises.
There's a beautiful chapter in the book, chapter 2, actually, tending to your heart. What does it mean to tend to your heart?
So tending to your heart, which is priority number 1 is your relationship with God, but priority number 2 is tending to your heart. And by that, I'm not talking about self-care in the way that most of us would define it. I'm not talking about you need a break, so go get a massage. You need a rest and some replenishment, go get your nails done. I'm really talking about giving your heart room to feel, to reach out to God, to name what feels empty, to name what is needed, and to connect on that level with the Lord, and to be willing to go deeper. We live so superficially, and there's so much. If you go through all the other priorities, there's a lot in the other priorities. Well, over all of them, it's how you love, right? You're being called to love in all of them, but there's a lot of doing in the priority in your marriage, with your children, with your home, with the outside world. And this is saying, first and foremost, tend to your heart, tend to your interior life. It's like an iceberg. You know, when you think about the Titanic, how when the Titanic came up, and if you watch the movie, if you go back and watch it, which I think it's coming out again, you can watch it. It seems like, how could that little iceberg cause all that damage? And the reason why is because the iceberg really was down here. And the same is true of ourselves. Like, what is underneath the water? What is below the surface? What is in our hearts? That is the bulk of who we are. And then we've got our outward behavior. But if we don't tend to this, we're going to miss who we're called to be, for sure. And we're going to end up being quite superficial. And that won't be enough to reach out into a broken world of people who are really suffering. And it won't be enough for us when we start to hit things that are really hard. We need something, we need to put the roots down deeper by really cultivating an interior life.
Yeah. I picked up the book, to prepare for today, and read it again. I hadn't read it in a while. And two things that really struck me was, I feel like in Walking with Purpose, you're taking women on a journey from chaos to order, on a journey from confusion to clarity. For a woman who's out there who just feels overwhelmed by the chaos and the confusion, like, what would you say to her?
I would say to her, I really do. I do go back to what I said to you at the beginning, that yes, I've written this book and you can read this on your own, and I'm glad it's written and I'm glad it's out there. But what I would say is, do your best to find community and to step into this journey of going deeper in your interior life in the context of authentic relationship with other women. See if there's a Walking with Purpose group in your area. And if there isn't, talk to us about starting one, because we coach people and hold their hand every step of the way, because there's something really incredible about exploring these things in the context of other women that are on the journey with you, telling you you're not alone, supporting you. You realize that we've all got the same questions. We've all got the same struggles. And what I often talk about with Walking with Purpose is, when I would invite people to come, the number of times I heard a woman say, I've just got too much on my plate, I can't go. And I would say to her, this isn't one more thing to put on your plate. This is the plate. This is what will help you form that foundation of relationships, of good habits that just help things come into order, and of a way of drawing closer to God very personally that will change everything else and make all the other things so much more manageable.
You close the book by talking about your true worth. And I think a lot of people, but maybe women in particular, feel out of touch with their true worth. I think often society makes them feel like they're not enough because they focus on the wrong things. How would you encourage women to get back in touch with their true worth?
I think that question is a question of identity, which is just becoming more and more important, that we, to know what we're worth, we have to know who we are. And our true identity is not something that we have to go out and discover. And it's not something that we have to perform in order to earn. It's not a way in which we have to prove ourselves to anyone, which is what typically happens with women. We hustle for our worth. Our true identity is bestowed on us by God. And he looks at each woman individually, not as a mass of humanity, each woman, and says to her, you are my daughter, and you are not just my daughter, you are my beloved daughter. And when I made you, I created a masterpiece filled with giftings and filled with things that are just unique to you. And you have something to offer the world. But that doesn't need to be some big thing that you're doing where it's Instagram worthy, or it's award worthy, or it's something where people are like, oh, you've done that. It's really a call to love well. And I would challenge women to root their identity in their belovedness as God's daughter. And that is a relationship with him where he is saying, there's nothing you can do to make me love you more, or something you can do that can make me love you less. Like, you have my heart, you have my love, you have my blessing, you have my acceptance. You don't have to earn that. But what I'm inviting you into is living your life in a way where how you measure your worth and how you measure your day is something totally different. So your worth, that's already settled. That was settled on the cross. That's how Jesus said, this is what you're worth. You're worth everything. You're worth my life. You're worth the ultimate suffering. You are worth everything. But now, how worthwhile was your day? Because I think we connect those things. Like, what have I even done today? I don't know. I've wiped noses. I've made peanut butter jelly sandwiches. I've done stupid things at work. Like, who even cares? Like, we look at our day and we just think, did any of that even matter? And God says, that's not how I want you to measure the worth of yourself or the worth of your day. What I want you to do at the end of the day is take a look back, not with the spirit of judgment, more with the spirit of curiosity, and say, how did I love? How did I love today? And to, instead of pursuing a list of things that earn us accolades or things that make someone go, oh, aren't you quite the impressive woman? To be able to look back and say, I loved well today. And that can be in such hidden ways. But I believe in the Lord's eyes, it's those hidden things that we're going to find on the other side of eternity have had the most value. That's the things we hustle hard after. He's like, you got your reward then. That was the reward. All those likes on Instagram, that was the reward. But you love in a hidden place, you sacrifice for the sake of another, and nobody even hears about it. Just wait for the reward that just got stored up for you in heaven, because you will get that one day. And that is a life well lived. That's a day well spent. That's true, worthy living.
What is it that mothers need to know about motherhood that perhaps they forget or get distracted from?
That's a big question. I think first and foremost, it goes back to what I just said. It's how we love. It's how we love. We are to love our children well, and let go of any expectation of who we wish they would be, what we wish they would do. A lot of women live vicariously through their kids, and that doesn't get anywhere. You know, that leads to resentment. And so often then those kids can't really figure out who they really are and what they're really passionate about. But in loving them well, we're going to be truth tellers. In loving them well, we're going to not say nothing matters, anything goes. What you do with your body doesn't matter. What you do with your decision making doesn't matter. No, we're going to love them enough to speak truth. Yeah. But from the very beginning, we're going to do all that we can do to introduce them to a loving and personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That's key. And by that, I don't mean that then if your kids have walked away from the Lord or from the church, you did a crummy job and just forget the whole thing. We all have free will. We all have free will. Our kids have free will. You can do everything absolutely perfectly, and every single one of your kids can walk away from the Lord because it's their heart and their decision. But it is on us to provide the opportunities to encounter him, to look for those, to facilitate those, and to continue to grow in our own spiritual lives in such a way that we're not just saying, well, we need to go to church, or you need to be an altar server, or you need service hours or whatever, but just that they would be witnessing in us joy, conversion, a turning to the Lord for strength and as the source of our hope, that we would be living it out before them authentically and verbally. We have to be talking about it or they won't know to even ask the questions. So to lean into that most of all, to realize it is way, way, way more important to give our kids opportunities to encounter Christ than it is to get our kids into top-notch universities. That's a whole other subject, but that's a bunch of baloney, that's really what matters. It is not.
So powerful. My guest is Lisa Brenninkmeyer, her book, Walking with Purpose. Lisa, so good to be with you. I hope we can do it again. There's just so many great topics to explore with you.
Well, I felt just the same. Thank you so much. It was a privilege to chat today and always, always good to be with you. So thank you.
I appreciate it.